They came, they met, they talked. What's next for nation-building projects? This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
All the news you need to know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
Now what? Prime Minister Mark Carney and his provincial counterparts have wrapped up their in-person First Ministers meeting in Saskatoon. And while the theme of the meeting seemed to be projects in the national interest, the gathering ended without any sort of specific list of such projects. But Prime Minister Carney outlined what his government would do to advance such projects in the future.
To be deemed in the national interest, those projects should, amongst others, strengthen the Canadian economy, strengthen our autonomy, our resilience and our security, provide undeniable benefits to Canada, have a high likelihood of successful execution, be a high priority for Indigenous leaders, and to drive Canada's clean growth potential. Under a new process, once a project is designated as being in the country's national interest, a new federal major project office will bring together all relevant federal departments to provide a single set of conditions that must be met for those projects to advance. And the commitment is to proceed with the approval process for a maximum of 2 years under a new streamlined process that prioritizes federal resources to these most important projects. We will also work towards one project, one review, including through new cooperation agreements with the provinces.
The premiers seemed genuinely pleased with how the meeting went. Ontario Premier Doug Ford likened the Prime Minister to jolly old St. Nick.
This has been the best meeting we've had in 10 years. Simple. Best meeting I've had in 7 years. And there was no expectations that the Prime Minister was going to come out and say, you get that project, you get that project. It was a great discussion. Now, we were all talking. Now it's time to put it into action. All of us are responsible. But I thought it was an incredible meeting, great communication, great collaboration, and we all walked out of that room united. And that's the most important thing. Now the Prime Minister is going to go to work, get the legislation passed, and we'll divvy it up. I described him today as Santa Claus. He's coming, and his sled was full of all sorts of stuff. Now he's taking off back to the North Pole. He's going to sort it out, and then he's going to call us. So, and we're building a short of Santa Claus is my big belly. I got to loan it to him.
So what does this mean for the prospect of new pipelines? Another pipeline to the West Coast, or something like an Energy East pipeline, or even a pipeline to Churchill, Manitoba. The Prime Minister isn't ruling them out as long as the energy is decarbonized.
Specifically within energy, opportunities, yes, for an oil pipeline to get to Tidewater. Now, within the broader context of national interest, the interest is in, as mentioned in the press release, decarbonized barrels. So working alongside forms of decarbonization for those barrels. That is absolutely in our interest. It provides diversification of trade partners. It provides the development of new industries. It provides economic activity across the West and into the North. So, yes, there's real potential there. We took up a good deal of our time in discussions and potential to move forward on that. And if further developed, the federal government will look to advance it.
So was that music to the Alberta Premier's ears? Well, Danielle Smith called it part of a grand bargain.
We know that there is a group of oil sands companies that have been advocating for some time for what they call the Pathways Project that would decarbonize the production of their bitumen through the use of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, ultimately using hydroelectric or small modular nuclear to decarbonize, and then direct air capture for the last mile. I think the point I was making to the Prime Minister and my colleagues is that there's lots of ways to decarbonize, but the Pathways project is an expensive project. It would cost anywhere from $10 to $20 billion to get built. And to make the economic case for that, having more egress with more barrels to be sold to Asia is the way to pay for it. If we had a 1 million barrel a day pipeline going to the Northwest BC coast, that would generate about $20 billion a year in revenues. And so that seems like a pretty good value proposition if both of those projects can proceed at once.
How do they feel about that in British Columbia? BC Premier David Eby was not at this meeting. He's on a trade mission in Asia. Nikki Sharma is the Deputy Premier of British Columbia. She was there, but didn't sound enthusiastic about BC being the endpoint for another pipeline from Alberta.
There's no proponent at this stage. We're going to be focused on really shovel-ready products or projects in BC that we can bring forward that we know will have a really solid impact on the economy and will help us work together with our neighbors.
But is it not shoveling the problem a bit down the road? Because it could come at the confrontation at some point. How do you see that happening? If it?
Yeah, I look forward to the discussion. I think what we're going to try to do here through this conversation is find areas where we can agree and where we can find alignment. I think there's a lot of goodwill at the table about figuring out ways that we can bring projects forward, and we're going to be focusing on those projects that have proponents, that have a lot of First Nations alignment, that are ready to go.
But Premier Smith suggested if a westbound pipeline was given the green light by Ottawa, there are companies that would want to build one.
I mean, it's up to us to find the proponent, I think. I think if there's some certainty that a process is going to be successful in a reasonable period of time, a 2-year window, I think that there will be a proponent that will step forward. My view would be that we'll have failed at the assignment if government has to build another pipeline. That will demonstrate to us that we didn't create the conditions for private investment to come to the table.
Not everyone is as happy or as optimistic as these premiers and the Prime Minister. First Nation leaders are warning there could be trouble ahead, even protests, like the Idle No More protests of 2012, if so-called nation-building projects go ahead without their input. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
He's with us every week to try and make sense of this crazy world. Professor Ian Lee is back with us from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Welcome back.
Good afternoon, Rob.
Let's talk about Canada doing more business with countries like China and India. It's in the news today. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper gave a speech in Brampton over the weekend, and he encouraged, talking about India, he encouraged Canadian officials to put our recent disputes behind us. Meanwhile, the new Foreign Affairs Minister, Anita Anand, recently said of India, Canada is looking at deepening our economic cooperation and advancing shared priorities. Now, on the China situation, we know that Canada imposed the 100% tariffs on Chinese-made EVs, and in response, China hit Canada with tariffs on seafood and canola. And the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has said removing these tariffs will be a priority. So there's all this talk about Canada needing to pivot away, become less reliant on the United States. What promise do these two countries hold for Canada's economy? What would you say?
First off, I agree with him. I've actually been saying this for months. So I'm not just agreeing because I respect Stephen Harper. I've been saying this for months. I've been probably saying it for years, and there's a reason for that. As usual, it's always empirical. It's always based on numbers. India's population has surpassed China. It's now 1.43 billion people, growing very rapidly, both GDP and population. China's 1.2, 1.3 billion. I'm not trying to say it's only numbers. The numbers are a proxy for the opportunities that we have with these two countries. In fact, to make it more broad, if I can broaden it out for a moment, Asia Pacific, which includes both India and China, and a number of other countries there, represent very, very large opportunities. People may immediately think, yes, you're talking about agriculture. Actually, I looked up some numbers for some research I'm doing, and because there's all this talk right now about we've got to diversify our trade and become less dependent on the United States. I strongly agree with that. I've been saying that for years. And then people immediately, many Canadians, certainly in Ontario, leap to the conclusion it's manufactured goods, which is nonsense. It's nonsense because overwhelmingly our manufacturing is in automobiles. And if anybody bothers to look at China or India or Europe, they do not drive F-150 2-ton trucks. They do not drive 2-ton Lincoln Navigators. Over 65% of the output of the Canadian auto industry are great big behemoth automobiles, big honking SUVs, 8-cylinder, or trucks, Dodge Durangos or Dodge Ram trucks. They do not want in Europe or China or Japan or South Korea or India great big 2-ton plus 8-cylinder trucks where gasoline is very expensive because they deliberately price it very high with lots of taxes. So my point is, if it isn't manufactured goods, and we don't have any tech giants, we don't, like Google or Meta or et cetera, to export digital services, what's left? It's natural resources. So I went and looked up, what are we mostly exporting to India and China? Oh my goodness, natural resources. And guess what? We have enormous amounts of natural resources, not only oil and gas. We have timber, we have potash, we have nuclear fuel for nuclear reactors to produce electricity. So back to China and India. They're the two largest populations in the world for people, for the number of people.
Sure.
And they're growing. And when countries grow, their needs expand dramatically. So these are two enormous markets, not just today, for my lifetime, my children's lifetime, my grandchildren's lifetime, for another century or 2 or 5 or 10, who knows, that this is going to be hugely important to Canada's future. Not trivializing Europe, but Europe only has 500 million, and they're in steep economic decline, according to Mario Draghi, PhD, MIT economics, friend of Mark Carney, former governor of the European Central Bank, and he's published a report saying they're suffering a crisis of competitiveness and productivity. Sounds like Canada, by the way. And so for those saying we got to pivot to Europe, they're not looking at the evidence and the data.
Okay.
They've got to look to India
what about
and China.
What about the conduct, and maybe we'll have to pick this up in the second half, the conduct of, say, the Modi government, which has been accused of, sending gangs of hitmen here to, murder Canadian citizens. What about that?
Of course, I don't condone that. Nobody condones that. That's terrible. But we're going to have to use a famous phrase, in the Clinton years, the Bill Clinton presidency years, we're going to have to learn the art of compartmentalization. That does not mean we condone it. Of course we don't condone it. We'll never condone that. No more than we'll ever condone China kidnapping Canadian citizens. We may want to put some kind of clauses in I'm not a negotiator. It works at Global Affairs Canada.
Right.
How we're going to deal with that, we will want to deal with that. Maybe some kind of a protocol about, what do you call that? When you have a citizen captured in a foreign country, where we have exchanges, we may want to deal with
extradition agreements.
That kind. But we can't ignore the huge potential this is for all Canadians in those two countries.
Okay, we'll be right back with a little more on this. We'll talk about the Bank of Canada. It's rate day tomorrow for the Bank of Canada. We're talking about Canada possibly expanding its business relationship with countries like China and India with Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. You talked a little bit about India. Let's focus on China, which has a long history of things like industrial espionage. You mentioned hostage diplomacy. It's a one-party authoritarian state. It engages in foreign interference in Canada, intimidation of the diaspora. Is this a country that we should really be deepening our ties with? Well, what do you say? I know you believe in realpolitik, right? Realpolitik, right? That's one of your things.
A profound set of questions, and they're perfectly legitimate to ask them. It reminds me, it really does, way back and when Kissinger joined the White House, of Richard Nixon. And Kissinger was trying to convince, and a debate started, because the United States had no relationship with China, no embassies, none. They pretended that China didn't exist. And China was very poor at the time. I mean, unbelievably poor. There had been mass starvation in the 60s under Mao's ridiculous policies that restricted without going into it, the history. It was deliberate policy that caused some mass starvation by Chinese peasants. And Kissinger said, look, just because we find the regime odious doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean we shouldn't talk to them. He says we must go in, basically, he said, with our eyes wide open and develop agreements that deal with those differences. But we can't be morally judging the regime, was what he argued. Very quickly, I think that we have to be very careful, yes. In fact, I doubt, because of the industrial espionage, which is chronic and demonstrated and documented repeatedly, I doubt that we can have a full, wide open trade agreement. I think it'll have to be a modified trade agreement, a restricted trade agreement that restricts the trade to, let's call it loosely, low tech. And I'm not putting down agricultural products. They're very important. I eat every day, after all. We all do. But they're not in the same degree of sensitivity that I'm eating fish from the Maritimes in China from Canada as a high technology piece with lots of IP embedded. So we may have to restrict anything that's got stuff we're worried about losing because of the IP, pharmaceutical products, technology products. But we can still export lentils or wheat or timber or LNG without worrying about that. And on the other side, and I quite agree, we may have to have more explicit protections built in separately, not into a trade agreement, but into an act of Parliament that deals with foreign espionage in Canada by any government in terms of where they're harassing former members of that country in Canada who have now become Canadian citizens.
Okay, very quickly, the Bank of Canada is going to make an interest rate announcement tomorrow. The overnight rate is 2.75%. It pressed the pause button last time around back in April after 7 consecutive rate cuts. In a minute or less, what does the bank do tomorrow?
I think they'll sit. I don't think they'll cut the rate. The economy is doing quite well. Of course, we could always do better, that caveat. But I think they have to worry about if they drive down cut the rate again, it's going to put significant downward pressure on the Canadian dollar. And we import 1/3 of the totality of our GDP, which means it'll push up inflation. And the inflation numbers are starting to trend back up. That's critical to understand for everybody. That was documented in the latest monetary policy report of the Bank of Canada, that inflation rate's starting to move back up, and they don't want to reheat the economy. And there's no need yet. The economy hasn't collapsed. The unemployment has not gone through the roof. So I think that they can sit on the rate. In other words, not increase it, not decrease it, and just wait to see how the economy moves forward.
Wait and see.
And before the next rate increase announcement date.
Very good. Thank you. We'll speak next week.
Thanks
Great to hear from
Rob.
you. Yeah, Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University.
The Newsday Panel.
Yeah, time for the Newsday Panel with Neil Brody, longtime conservative strategist, commentator. Welcome back, Neil Brody.
Good afternoon, Rob. How you doing?
Yeah, great. Great to hear from you. Ashton Arsenault is with us as well. He's a partner at Crestview Strategy. Welcome back to you, Ashton, as well. Great to hear from you today.
Good to be here, Rob. Thanks.
Ashton, what are your thoughts on how the First Minister's meeting went?
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Prime Minister, I think that First Minister's meeting was a success more than anything else. Obviously, pretty early in the mandate, he got everyone together in a room in a less than favorable place if you're a Liberal, and it seems like it was an actual conversation. The visuals looked pretty good coming out of yesterday, and I'm struggling to come up with an example of a First Minister's meeting that was, I guess, sort of more collegial than what we saw yesterday. And obviously, there are some tensions, but there are always going to be some tensions in this system. And yeah, look, not to state the obvious, but a successful meeting doesn't necessarily guarantee future success, far from it, in fact. And so now the real work begins. Good opening salvo. But coming out of yesterday, I think, the PMO and the Prime Minister would have to declare it a bit of a success.
Okay. What do you think, Neil?
I would agree with Ashton on most things. It was a great photo op. I saw a picture online through a doorway that showed about 50 people sitting around a table. You know, my experience is 50 people sitting around a table doesn't guarantee any movement on anything, but it was a good photo. There was good media, you know, the headlines were all positive, but none of the headlines included the words bridge, port, or pipeline. The Prime Minister's readout, which, you know, for your listeners is, you know, the Prime Minister would put out a published summary of what was talked about. You know, those usually run half a page. This one was a little over a page. So if you're judging success on word count, that was a good word count. But much like Ashton, you know, talk is cheap. Everyone had a good chat yesterday. Mr. Carney has sold himself as a man of action, a man with a plan. If the plan is meetings, he's hitting it out of the park. If his plan is to have something accomplished, there's still room for improvement.
Okay. People in politics and in government communications, sometimes they talk about announceables. We have to have an announceable. Other than, well, we got together and we had a great meeting and we got along and we agreed on a lot of things. What was the announceable? What was the announceable? Like, what was announced yesterday, I guess, is what I would get at. Ashton, sorry, go ahead.
Not much. I mean, it was an announceable to work towards a future announceable.
Yes.
Yes. You know, I think yesterday was, you know, more about alignment. This is sort of the new regime, the new operating principles. Here's what we want to achieve. Are you on side? What are your irritants going to be? And what can we do to sort of chart a course forward on the things that we want to do? So, yeah, I mean, in terms of announceables, not much, Rob, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, but I still don't think that makes the meeting unsuccessful per se. It's just
okay.
More work to do.
Okay. Do you agree with that, Neil?
I think the best announceable that Mr. Carney could have gotten out of that is nobody said anything bad. You know, and we might talk about this later, I think, but, you know, Mr. Ford, the Premier of Ontario, had some good things to say. There was no explosion from Premier Smith. The Premier of Quebec didn't come out and say we're separating. So, you know, if you're looking for announceable, I don't think there was anything in the traditional sense of announceable, but coming out without an explosion, I think is the best that Carney could have hoped for.
Okay. On pipelines, even if they are quote unquote decarbonized pipelines, is the Prime Minister's term for pipelines. What do you think the chances are any of us will see a new pipeline in this country in our lifetimes? Ashton, what do you think after a meeting like this and based on what you're hearing?
Well, it depends on what kind of pipeline you're talking about and where said pipeline would be. So it seems, you know, perhaps to no one's surprise, once again, Quebec is going to be the likely main obstacle in the story. That really shouldn't be a surprise. So I think, look, a west heading east pipeline is going to be a tall order, and I think the conditions Quebec would impose or require to make that a reality might just make the entire prospect not viable. A pipeline perhaps heading west could be a different story, or a pipeline heading south could be a different story. So I'm not going to dismiss the prospect of future pipelines out of hand entirely, and I think the federal government would do well to try to prioritize the movement of our natural resources. But in this scenario, I don't think all pipelines are created equally, Rob.
Okay. What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, listen, I think there's an opportunity for a pipeline in our lifetime, as you put it, until every 10th word out of the Prime Minister's mouth shifts from catalyze to pipelines.
Right.
You know, the rubber has to hit the road. You know, unless Mark Carney left that meeting and called up the top 5 pipeline companies and told them the first person who shows up with a serious proposal for a pipeline gets approved. Without that sort of definite assurance from the Prime Minister to the head of these companies, nobody's going to come and invest here with any sort of uncertainty around legislation or consultation or all the other variables that go into a construction project like this. There has to be the Prime Minister of the country guaranteeing a pipeline will be built. Otherwise, there'll be no investment.
Okay, be right back with a little more talk about pipelines. Could you see the government funding a pipeline or helping to fund a pipeline? Would that be a non-starter? Does it have to be 100% private investment? Some comments about that yesterday. We'll talk about what we heard from some of these premiers. Carney's like Santa Claus, best meeting in 10 years. I mean, high praise. Or is it high praise only because Justin Trudeau set the bar so low with these sorts of things? Neil, could you see the government putting taxpayer money into a pipeline project? Or would that politically be a non-starter?
Not directly. We've heard Mr. Carney since he started running for Liberal leadership that the way forward for this is with an Indigenous loan guarantee program. And in the throne speech, they talked about a dollar figure of $10 billion set aside for First Nations to buy in equity positions in these sorts of big infrastructure projects. So no, I don't think there'll be another, whatever it was, Trans Mountain pipeline that was bought by the government and then completed at whatever it was, 6 times the actual cost. But there will be money fed into investment schemes to allow people to buy into it with government money. And, nothing says reconciliation like $10 billion. So I expect this to kill, the expectation is for this to kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Okay, very interesting. What do you see happening with that? Public money towards a pipeline project. Neil's outlined what he thinks might happen. What do you see happening there, Ashton?
Well, I think Neil's analysis is correct. I mean, there are enough skeletons in the closet to have anybody with half a brain in the political class want to avoid throwing public money against a pipeline. I think, history being doomed to repeat itself and all. And I think as an extreme measure of last resort, maybe that conversation begins, but that's certainly not going to be the opening salvos. And I just don't see it viable, both from A, an investor perspective, but B, also a political perspective for the new government. So I think Neil's on it.
Okay. Let's listen to Ontario Premier Doug Ford during yesterday's post-meeting news conference, talking about how the meeting went.
This has been the best meeting we've had in 10 years. Simple. Best meeting I've had in 7 years. And there was no expectations that the Prime Minister was going to come out and say, you get that project, you get that project. It was a great discussion. Now, we were all talking. Now it's time to put it into action. All of us are responsible. But I thought it was an incredible meeting, great communication, great collaboration, and we all walked out of that room united. And that's the most important thing. Now the Prime Minister is going to go to work, get the legislation passed, and we'll divvy it up. I described him today as Santa Claus. He's coming, and his sled was full of all sorts of stuff. Now he's taking off back to the North Pole. He's going to sort it out, and then he's going to call us. So, and we're building a short of Santa Claus is my big belly. I got to loan it to him.
Right. So, Doug Ford very happy with how things. Carney's like Santa Claus. Best meeting in 10 years. Best meeting he's had in 7 years. Danielle Smith saying things like, "Well, I really appreciate the change in tone that we're hearing from this government compared to the previous government." It seems to be as time moves on here, and it's early days, it seems to be the reputation of Justin Trudeau's time as Prime Minister is taking even more of a beating, that people are kind of realizing, whether it's what happened yesterday or stories about how Carney expects people to show up on time, be prepared, dress in a business-like manner, Mr. Trudeau wearing socks to the throne speech, that the previous Prime Minister he just wasn't serious. He wasn't a serious person. And maybe his government was unserious as well. Am I being unkind, Neil?
Listen, Rob, I think Justin Trudeau will go down in the history books as the Jeff Spicoli of Canadian politics. Hey, why don't you get a job, Trudeau? What for? You need the money. All I need are some tasty waves, a cool buzz, and I'm fine. Listen, Justin Trudeau, it's becoming more and more apparent, I hope, to the Canadian people as each day goes on since he left politics, that he was not the prime minister we all thought he was. 20% or whatever he had at the polls when he left was what he deserved. I can't think of 5 things that he did while he was prime minister that are great for Canada. Maybe I can think of 5 if I work hard.
Okay.
But I don't see Justin Trudeau being treated kind by the history books.
Man, oh man. Neil Brody digging into the memory banks there with the Fast Times at Ridgemont High reference. Actually, I don't know how you follow that, but what would you say?
I think immediately right off the bat, you just note the tone shift, right? And obviously it's being appreciated. I think Prime Minister Trudeau, at least at the beginning, started out trying to get everybody in a room, but the enthusiasm for that certainly waned over time. And look, Trudeau and the political wedge games and pitting one province against the other is the element in this story that's probably most damaging to his legacy, should it even exist at the moment, to Neil's point. And, what he did worked politically, but it created some long-lasting scar tissue, and it appears that Carney is at least attempting to right the ship on that. So more to follow, I'm assuming.
Very good. Okay, be right back with some closing thoughts. We'll talk about that vote in the House of Commons, and a loss for the Liberals, an early loss in the House of Commons for the Liberals, a vote on amendments to the throne speech. What does it mean? Does it mean anything? We'll be right back. This is News Radio. With Neil Brody, longtime Conservative strategist, and partner at Crestview Strategy, Ashton Arsenault. It's our Newsday panel. The Liberals lost a vote in the House of Commons yesterday on amendments to the throne speech. What do you think of that, Ashton? What do you think of that?
Yeah, a new government with a rather strong minority mandate losing its first vote in the House is a black eye. No question about that. No other way to spin it. It showcased a lack of planning and I think a lack of understanding how the House dynamics are working, really. And look, I don't think it's a secret that the Tories understand the procedural elements of the House and how to capitalize on them a bit better than the Liberals. And the Liberals can't find a way to close that sort of comprehension and skill gap, their lives are going to be pretty miserable over this mandate. So not a good look out of the gate, Rob. Not a good look.
Okay. Neil, what do you think of it?
Well, Ashton, again, is one of the great political analysts in Ottawa, has hit the nail right on the head. This was a gong show moment for the Liberal Party, a huge embarrassment for Steve McKinnon, the leader of the government in the House of Commons, for Mark Garretson, the whip for the Liberal Party. They kind of, lottie-dawed through the last, 3 years of coalition with the NDP. They didn't really have to work that hard. Now there's no NDP. They're up against the Conservatives and the Bloc. They have to get their ducks in a row because they can't afford another screw-up like this in the next, 18 months, 24 months, 48 months that they're going to be running Parliament. I talk about our time, the time the Harper government was around. We had 2 gentlemen in the lobby of the House of Commons at all times who were procedure gurus. So stuff like this didn't happen. To top it all off, we had strong whips and strong House leaders. But this is amateur hour for the Liberals to lose this sort of a vote.
Okay, so the amendment was show us an economic update or a budget in the spring. Does that mean there's going to be an economic update or a budget in the spring? It is the will of the House, one would assume now, because this has passed. So what do you think that means? Can the government just ignore that? What do you think, Ashton?
Yeah. So what they did, it's non-binding, and therefore I think this probably gets chalked up to a blip in time. Don't get me wrong; it's a horrible look because now the will of the House is basically show us a budget this session. They don't have enough time to do that. I don't know exactly how they're going to wiggle their way out of this one, but it's non-binding. The government isn't necessarily forced to do anything, but at the end of the day, it's a really bad look, and I think they're basically going to have to go over the top with another amendment. It's just a situation that could have and should have been avoided. And yeah, it's a really bad look.
Okay.
Really
In a minute or less, does this mean we're going to see some kind of economic update in the spring? Probably not. Neil, what's your best bet?
Probably not. My understanding on the minutia of this is they'll have to write a response to the speech from the throne that includes we'll have a budget, and it's just a black eye in the government because they'll get punched repeatedly on this over the coming months.
Okay. Great to hear from both of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Rob.
Speak
Take
soon.
care.
Yeah, that's our Newsday panel with Neil Brody, longtime conservative strategist and commentator, worked in the Harper PMO. Ashton Arsenault is partner at Crestview Strategy, also in Ottawa today. I'm Rob Snow. Talkback is coming up. We're going to talk about social media and young people and whether there should be restrictions in Canada. Age limits for young people accessing social media. Efforts are underway. Efforts are well underway in other countries. Maybe we should follow their lead. What would you say? Join the discussion on Talkback right after the news on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. Today's topic, regulating social media for youth in Canada. And here's a big question for you. Give it some thought and give us a call at 1-833-668-2577. Would you support or oppose banning young people in Canada from using social media? And the age range that we have in mind is somewhere around 14 to 16 years old, because that's what they're doing in other places. In other words, if you're under the age of 14 or 15 or 16, you wouldn't be allowed to access a social media platform. And the government would restrict the use of social media for young people the same way it restricts the consumption of other products for young people, tobacco, alcohol, cannabis. What would you think of that? Is that something you would be in favor of? Or is it something you would be against? 1-833-668-2577. That's our call-in line. 1-833-668-2577. Our lines are available right now. Important topic. There are some places in Canada where they're looking at it. I would say they're taking baby steps in this direction, regulating social media for young people. In the province of Quebec, for example, a government committee has issued a very lengthy report, and it makes all kinds of recommendations about social media. One of them being that social media access should be restricted for all children in that province under the age of 14, unless they have the consent of a parent or guardian to be on social media. A report released by this committee says the most popular platforms are selling addictive and dangerous content to our youth, all in the name of profit. And it recommends that the government also regulate so-called social media influencers. It suggests that micropayments be banned from video game platforms. But the big attention-grabbing headline is Quebec proposes banning social media for youth. And a child would have to be, as I say, 14 years old before they would be allowed to access any social media platform, unless, as mentioned, they have the consent of their parents. What do you think of that idea? Step in the right direction or not so fast? In Ontario, an NDP MPP, so a provincial member of the legislature, is going to try and get a motion passed through that province's legislature to have the Ontario government explore various ways of doing essentially the same thing and regulating social media, possibly restricting access to social media for young people. Catherine Fife is her name. She's calling on the Ontario government to at least study the impact that social media is having on young people. She uses a number of different terms. She wants to know more about the algorithms. She wants to know more about what she calls surveillance capitalism and terms like the infinite scroll. She wants the government to explore restrictions for accessing social media to people 13 years of age and younger. So just like in Quebec, you would have to be at least 14 in order to use social media. But these are very early stage things, and Catherine Fife is in opposition in Ontario. So how far this gets is anyone's guess. She wants health warnings on social media platforms. You log onto a social media platform, the social media platform will be obligated under law to show you a health risk warning. What do you think about these measures? Other countries are way ahead of anything that's being done in Canada in this regard. In Australia, they have moved ahead with restricting access to social media for youth under the age of 16. You have to be 16 years old to have an account on social media in that country. And the law in that country says the platforms must take, quote, reasonable steps to prevent anyone under the age of 16 from obtaining a social media account. Failure to comply comes with severe financial penalties, fines in the tens of millions of dollars. The Australian government has created a new government position called the E-Safety Commissioner, and it's that person's responsibility to police social media platforms and make sure they're complying with the law. In France, the government passed a law last year restricting social media access to people under the age of 15. You have to be 15 years old to use a social media platform in France, although you can get one if your parents approve. And the platforms themselves have to verify a user's age and must obtain proof of consent. And France wants other EU countries to follow its example. And other countries are thinking about it or are already doing this. They're exploring it in countries like Denmark, Spain, Italy. What about Canada? What about Canada? What about the province you live in? What should we be doing in this country, either at the federal government level or at the provincial level of government? Should we be doing anything? Should the government be doing anything? Should accessing social media be left up to parents? Make it the parents' job to decide if parents think it's okay for their children to use social media, even if they're 13 years old or 12 years old, and the government should be hands off. Or would you like to see restrictions? See the government treat social media use the same way it treats other potentially harmful products, whether it's tobacco, alcohol, cannabis. And no matter what the parents think, you should have to be a certain age to access these platforms because of the harms that they can have on the well-being of young people. Share your opinions, please. Very important topic. We talked a lot about mental health last week. Poor mental health for young people. Well, the experts say social media is among the primary culprits. Young people in their social media consumption. Other countries are cracking down. They are imposing age limits, restrictions. Should we do the same thing here? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. If you've never called before, just mention that, and we'll make your call a priority. I'm Rob Snow. It's Talkback. This is News Radio. Youth and social media is our topic today. We are asking, should access to social media be restricted for children? Should there be an age limit? 14, 15, 16 years old. What do you think? 1-833-668-2577. Eve is a first-time caller calling from Halifax today. Hello, Eve.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Eve. What do you think?
I agree with Australia that the age should be 16 and require parental consent.
Okay. And why do you believe that?
For anyone who's younger.
Okay. Why is that your opinion, Eve? Hello, Eve. Oh, I believe she's gone already. Okay. She believes 16 years old. Fair enough. Okay. Tony in Kitchener is up now. Hi, Tony. You're on the air. What's your opinion here, Tony?
Hi, Rob. I would agree. There should be maybe an age limit, but how are they going to enforce it? I mean, when we were kids, we used to go to the convenience store and buy cigarettes. And when we were a little bit older, we'd wait outside the beer store and pay someone to get us some beer. I mean, there's always ways around it. I think it's a good idea that they should have an age limit, but I don't know how they're going to be able to police something like that.
Okay, well, they're exploring things like, I mean, there are advancements in technology. You can use things like face scans, iris scans, fingerprints.
Okay.
For example.
Yeah, well, all right. I mean,
uploading government official government ID the way they do with gambling websites for gambling platforms, right?
I think it's a great idea. I mean, kids spend way too much time on their phones, but
okay.
I don't know. I think it's going to be a hard one to police on that one.
Yeah, hard one to police. That's one of the things that they might struggle with is enforcement. You know, if a ban is going to be ineffective, if children are always going to find a way around it, is it even worth the effort? Certainly. I appreciate your opinion there, Tony. Yeah, good point.
All right, thanks, Rob.
In all. Yeah, you too. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Youth and social media are our topic today. A couple of lines available there. Should we be restricting access to young people to these social media platforms because of the potential harm to things like their mental health? Other countries are moving in this direction. What would you say? Jay is in Kitchener. Hello, Jay. You're up next, Jay. Hi there.
Well, I'm thinking that they shouldn't be using social media until they can vote, because that way, if you're old enough to vote, then you can use social media. That way you'll be responsible for the choices, and you can be strong enough to deal with the consequences of social media.
Okay, 18 years old. Wow, so all grown up. Pretty much an adult at that point, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the voting age, as you say, 18 years old.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. In Quebec, it was the legal drinking age as well for the longest time. Okay, 18 years old.
Yep.
Thank you so much. The harms of social media, they're pretty well known now after more than 20 years of Facebook. I mean, social media linked to higher rates of depression and anxiety, especially for teenagers. Social media use can lead to feelings of low self-esteem because teenagers see other teenagers living the perfect influencer style life, and they can feel inadequate. They feel they don't measure up. There's this thing, FOMO, fear of missing out. And teenagers see other teenagers doing all kinds of fun stuff together, and this can, if they're left out, they could lead to feelings of social exclusion and isolation, and just the simple fact that it's addictive. Social media is designed to be addictive. Is that really in dispute right now, that social media is addictive? That people are given these little hits of dopamine when their posts are liked or shared or followed, or when they get more followers or more quote-unquote friends, and this can lead to compulsive social media consumption, or what is sometimes called the infinite scroll. I find myself sometimes doing the infinite scroll on Twitter, for example. I sometimes wonder, where did the time go? Join the discussion, please. Lots of lines available there. 1-833-668-2577 as we talk today about restricting access to social media for youth in Canada. Other countries are doing it. Should we explore it here as well? 1-833-668-2577 to Wade. Sylvan Lake. Hello, Wade.
Hey, Rob. How you doing?
I'm good, Wade. What would you say?
Well, I would say, like alcohol and cigarettes, smartphones should not be allowed to be purchased or possessed until you're 18 years old. Because a dumb phone can be purchased, which would look distinctively different from a smartphone. So law enforcement, or any enforcement of any kind for that matter, has an actual visual. And I believe that 14 years old is too young. 16 is not a good time to hand them a major distraction while they're learning how to drive. So I think 18 is the magic number.
18 years old. Okay. You don't think that's too old?
Absolutely
You
not.
don't think that's too old? Okay. What about the idea? Does the government really need to be banning these things? What about? I mean, you're a big pro-freedom guy. What about? Well, just leave it up to the parents and let the parents decide. What about that?
Well, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
As long as the next child that commits suicide because of the bullying and whatnot, or the next child that gets injured by doing one of those TikTok challenges or whatever the heck it is they do, or the next time a child gets sexually exploited on one of those machines, then the parents that didn't step up should be charged with failing to provide the necessities of life.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I know you're very passionate about this topic, Wade. Thank you. To Dave in Cambridge, Ontario. Dave, what would you say, Dave? Age restrictions to access social media. Where do you land on that one?
Well, I think it's the parents' responsibility, and you remember the phrase that we're the government, we're here to help. Do we need more things under government control? Do we need more laws, more regulations, more committees, more money being spent in government programs just to police this thing? Allow the parents to do their job, and if they don't, then they'll suffer the whatever happens to the child.
Okay. Yeah, but if let's use this comparison that social media is every bit as bad as tobacco or alcohol, that it has ill effects on the health of young people. We have government age restrictions on the consumption of that. Why not have the same kind of government? Why not have the same kind of government restrictions on social media platforms?
It just adds another level of policing that we don't need, another level of government control that we're trying to get rid of. We're trying to eliminate government control at the moment, not increase it. So I don't think it's a good idea to have the government involved in making yet another product illegal or have regulations that need to be adjusted periodically for parents to have to control. Now, I understand in schools where you're trying to teach. I'm a master electrician myself, and I have apprentices that can't learn when they're on the phone. They're always on their phone. They can't learn. They're just always distracted, and that's the problem. Even when we're driving from job to job, they're on their phone. They're not thinking about their trade all the time. They're just out in la la land, and I see that a lot when it comes to phone use.
Okay. But as for an age restriction, 13-year-olds accessing, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever social media platforms they're using now. No way. You leave that up to the parents. Leave that up to the parents, you're saying.
Only in institutions when you're being taught.
Institutional setting, like an education setting.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a classroom. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Thank you. We'll be right back. The latest breaking news is coming up next.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Should access to social media be restricted for children? Should there be an age limit to log on to a social media platform? 14, 15, 16, or nothing? 1-833-668-2577 to have your say on Talkback on this topic today. A Fifth in Waterloo is up next. Hi, A Fifth. What's your opinion? Yeah, hi there. What's your opinion?
So there should be, but like around age like 12 to 13. But the only main problem is, just like Tony says, there will be really hard times, regularly, because even though people can do like RESMA and everything, people can just use their brother or sister's account, and they can also use it let's just say VPN, and go to a different country and start
VPN.
It, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like US or Australia, not even Australia. Well, Australia's banning it, but let's just say Pakistan or something like that. They can just go there, move their country to VPN and then use it. So that's the main problem.
Right. So you think young people will find a way to get around it?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Because of all the technology that's coming around.
Right. Even with things like biometric identification and the need for Like a
Oh,
face
yeah, because,
scan or a fingerprint? Or...
Like all they have to do is turn on VPN, and VPN basically just shows them, hey, you're not in this country, in Canada, so Canada wouldn't even know that they're here. They're in some other country.
So there's no regulations in effect in whatever, as you say, Pakistan. So I'll just access the Pakistan version of TikTok or whatever.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then they can just search for other, like, let's just say they want to search for, like, Canadian account or American account. They can just search it on the app. That's it. So that's the main problem. Even though, yes, I think it should be for until like 12 or 13, but it's impossible.
Okay. Thank you. Impossible to enforce, he says. Is that your view? Let's go to Noah is in Calgary. What would you say, Noah? A fifth says it would be impossible to enforce. What do you think?
I definitely think he's got a little bit of truth to that. He is right with the VPN, but I figure the age restriction should at least be 18 for all social media, because there's a lot of vulgar things and a lot of pornography basically and advertisements for it on social media. Like if you know what OnlyFans is, there's a lot of like people that pay for their advertisement and their content on like meme pages and like joke pages or whatever that you normally see. But like for the next 24 hours, you'll see like an explicit video advertising people's OnlyFans. And I think children should not be exposed to that. And I truly believe that like if once you're 18 or 19, depending on the province, you get your government ID, you get whatever you need, and then you're allowed to, have your social media as free will. I definitely, one of your previous callers, they also talked about how they should ban cell phones. I would have to disagree with that, because I think cell phones are a huge tool in society nowadays, and it's a supercomputer in your back pocket, essentially.
Okay. Yeah. I think the previous caller is saying a lot of these problems started with the marriage of the smartphone with social media. And a lot of what we're seeing right now is a result of the marriage of the smartphone with social media. That once social media went mobile, that's when a lot of the problems really began. You can't take a desktop computer to bed. You know what I mean? So yeah. But this is now you get young people. The social media use is causing sleeping problems. Young people are up all night consuming social media. You have this, what's known as this blue light exposure problem. People are overstimulated. There's evidence that the constant use of social media is affecting young people in their ability to concentrate, to focus. It's affecting their attention span, all of these things, because it is in the palm of their hands.
Yeah, so that's why I would definitely have to say that, like, I think once you turn of age of the province that you're in, and then you have free access to social media. But until then, while you're in school and everything, there's really no need to be comparing yourself to all these people with, celebrities and six packs and, whatever.
Gotcha.
And having this, like you were saying, you're missing out.
Right. So once you have that age of majority card, you can go and get your government ID. You can log on to social media. You can buy cigarettes, alcohol, cannabis, but whatever. You're grown up, and then you can go on social media. That would be your preferred state of things.
100%. Because honestly, 100%. Rob, I truly believe that there are no benefits for any children to be on social media. I do believe that social media is a dangerous place, and there's bad people on there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Very good. Siva is up next, also calling from Calgary. Siva, you're on the air. What's your opinion? Yeah. Hi there, Siva. What's your opinion?
Yes, I've been trying your line for the last 2 months, but I will say this quickly. First thing is, yes, we should have a law. That is the first thing is, yes, we should have a law. About the age, I don't have an opinion. It has to be arrived upon by consensus. That is number 2. And number 3 is, if you allow me, I would like to say 4 things which would cover all the audiences. I've been listening this for a long time, and a lot of people are saying parental responsibility. Just allow me to say 4 things. The first thing is law. The second thing is public awareness of law. The third thing is enforcement. And the fourth thing is effectiveness. Now, these are the 4 key things which I wanted to say. I'm not going to explain because you probably don't have time, but I will say this. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of law. Just yesterday, a cop, just stopped me and gave me like 6-7 tickets, like $2,500. Anyway, that's a different story. But There is some small TARP issue, small TARP issue, and then he just ticketed me for that, $486. And I've been driving this truck for 10 years. And cops are usually, they understand. They give you they give you like a couple of tickets and then for safety. And then what I'm saying is, laws have to be there. See, Canada is not India, Nigeria, or Pakistan. So the first thing, the difference is we are a society who think and we should have laws. That being said, because the previous caller or some caller said, oh, no, we don't have money. We want to get the government this, that, tax pay.
We want to get the government out of our lives. We don't want to be creating new policing bureaucracies.
Yes, that is correct. Right? But what I'm saying is you can choose. You can choose which laws to enforce. There are so many laws out there. That's what I'm saying. Thousands and millions of laws probably. But a government, it's political. Yeah. If Pierre Poilievre comes, maybe he will choose to enforce certain laws. If Jyoti Gondek can, so like that. So whatever it is, that is a political issue. But as a society, as a Canadian society, as people who think of, you cannot just shove everything to parental responsibility. I don't want to take. I have two children. One is 6.
Okay. I'm just gonna jump because you are right. We are at a time. But one of the points that you make when it comes to the enforcement of such an age restriction, I don't think we are envisioning some kind of regime where, well, they're going after the parents because their 13-year-old was on a social media platform. I think the enforcement would more be targeted at the platforms themselves. How is it that you allowed your platform to be able to be accessed by a 13-year-old in the first place? We're going to hit you with a $25 million fine, for example, if you're not enforcing the law that's in place, that it would be up to the social media companies to comply with this law, not that we're coming after parents or teenagers. Should there be an age limit to accessing social media in Canada, 14, 15, 16 years old? Where are you on restricting access to social media for young people? Glenn in Halifax is up next. Hello, Glenn. You're on the air, Glenn. Hi.
Hi, Rob. Can you hear me?
Hear you just fine. Glenn, what's your opinion?
Yeah, great. First of all, I just read a book called Anxious Generation, and it's all the information's laid out there if anyone really wants to get into it. Social media is a mental health epidemic right now. If you look into the stats, it's really terrible what it's doing to young people. And talking about, you're getting apprentices at age 18 who can't get off their phones. I've heard that a lot from a lot of tradespeople who are trying to train the young people. And it starts at 13. If they're on their phones at 13, they're addicted by the time they're 18. There's not much helping them there. As far as the enforcement goes, there's all kinds of elegant ways to do the enforcement. It doesn't have to be police. Anything from facial recognition to like different codes. It's all laid out in that book. I don't have them all at the tip of my tongue, but it's there.
Anxious Generation.
It's quite easy. Yeah, Anxious Generation.
Okay, Anxious Generation. I'm just Googling this right now. The Anxious Generation. Okay. By Jonathan Haidt. Yep. Is that right? H-I-D-T? Right. H-A-I-D-T?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So I'm a teacher. We're dealing with 10-year-olds who are going on porn sites, right? 10-year-olds who are getting into TikTok, things like that. And it's just, it's just one of the worst things out there. Yeah, I don't know if, I guess that's my 2 cents.
Okay. But so some people have called and said it would be hard to enforce, if not impossible to enforce. Kids will find a way around it. They'll use other people's accounts. They'll use VPNs, whatever the case might be. What do you think of that?
Yeah. So 2 interesting things I'll say about that is, if we're talking about passing laws, which they talk about in Anxious Generation, the doctors and the psychologists would like the limit set at 18 for what it's doing to people's brains. The people who own Facebook and all these other social, media platforms, they want it as low as possible.
Sure.
So the number between 18 and as low as possible for many, many states, it's been settled at 13, but it really should be at the minimum 16. So when these laws get to be passed, there's lobbyists fighting both sides.
Yes.
So again, in that book, there's much simpler ways to enforce that.
Okay. All right. Really interesting. Thank you for the reading recommendation, Glenn. Good to hear from you today. To Cole Harbour. Eric is in Cole Harbour. What would you say, Eric?
Hi, Rob. How you doing?
I'm good, Eric. Good to hear from you. What's your opinion?
Good. Well, first of all, the people who were talking about the age of majority, I think they're onto something there, and for all the reasons they said. Secondly, I think that you hit the nail right on the head when you talked about platform. I suggest to everybody to read a book called Control Oligarchs by Seamus Brenner, and he does a long expose on Meta and the platforms and what they're allowing people to digest, especially our youth. It might really open all our minds. Jonathan Haidt, he's a very good author. He wrote a book called Righteous Mind. I haven't read his Anxious People yet, but it's all in the platform, and it's all in the information that is being presented to people. And the last caller there, he seemed very knowledgeable. Somebody somewhere along the line is going to have to make up their mind. When is a young mind ready to accept material that they're not really prepared yet to handle, how they're going to interpret it? So I think that's the point he was getting at. But it does really need self-control, and the platform is what's allowed and what they're infiltrating. And the fourth thing is, as you know right now, I'm sort of saying this in tongue in cheek, but I think it's true. You mentioned how everybody's addicted to the phones. Well, you see it if you go into a doctor's office. You'll see 30 people waiting for their examination. Nobody's talking to each other. They're all on their phones and they're all scrolling. It's incredible. Now, if we were ever to have a CME, the sun's very active right now, and if we were to have a blackout, I think a lot of people will lose their mind because of the addiction to their phones.
The withdrawal. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, no,
okay.
It's serious.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and that need for instantaneous information. Imagine if you, as you say, if you were, denied that, if there was some sort of event that happened that rendered those devices thoroughly useless, what kind of state would the world be in? Good point, Eric. But maybe a conversation for another day. We'll be right back. Joe in Port Elgin. Joe, you're up next. What's your opinion, Joe?
Yeah, Rob, I'm down with your previous callers that set the age at 18. I don't think that kids need to be exposed to this crap. The social media is replete with con artists and predators and marketing groups that are trying to get the kids hooked on every possible bad thing you can think of. And I think these companies need to be shut down, taking a task on this, for infecting our kids. I have never subscribed to this stupid crap, and I never will. I am not a lemming, and I have a perfectly fine self-esteem. Thank you very much. So that's my opinion, Rob. I want this shut down.
Okay.
I know they'll have a workaround, these kids, but let's make it harder. Let's try to make it harder for them to get hooked on this crap.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. And I think we can fit Hickey in here before we have to stop at the top of the hour. Hickey, what's your opinion here?
Well, my opinion is two things that I want to say. Number one, we got this thing called AI coming in, and I know that we think that facial recognition and fingerprint scanners and all that stuff is the answer today. But I think that technology is changing so quickly that if we try and limit it, there's going to be a way AI is going to figure it out. And no offense, but these kids are a lot smarter than most of the callers on the phone when it comes to technology nowadays because of how quickly it's moving and how much time they spend on the phone. The other part is, where do we stop? What is social media? Is social media Steam, where they're watching 1,000 people play a video game? Or what is social media, I guess? Because is it a group text? Social media right now is Facebook, but it could be a lot of other things. Where do we stop with the limiting kids to be able to use it? Can they play on Sony PlayStations anymore, or is that part of social media?
Okay, all right. Very interesting. So you're kind of with the crowd that enforcement would be unworkable then.
Right. I think it's a good idea. I think social media is terrible for our children and our youth, but I think it's going to be really challenging to try and enforce it.
Okay. Yeah. And I do like your point. What is social media? Have we moved beyond what we would traditionally think of as social media? You know, Facebook, TikTok, X, Instagram, WhatsApp. Is there more to social media than just those platforms that we know of? As you say, gaming streams and things like that. Okay, interesting. Wow, really love the first hour of the discussion. I hope we can keep it coming. In hour number 2 of Talkback, coming up right after the news at the top of the hour. Youth and social media, our topic, and whether social media access should be restricted for children, an age limit. Other countries are doing it. Should we do it in Canada? What would you say? Talkback continues right after the latest breaking news here on News Radio.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Youth and social media are a topic of the day on Talkback, and welcome to hour number 2, where we have been asking, should access to social media be restricted for children? Should there be an age limit, say 14, 15, 16? Some of the callers in our first hour suggested 18 years old. Where do you stand on such restrictions? Would you support or oppose restricting access to social media for young people? 1-833-668-2577. All of our lines are available right now. We managed to clear the lines after our first hour. It was very, very busy. We all know about the very nasty and dark side of social media. I mean, it's great when everyone likes you, but it can be toxic. It can be toxic, especially if you become a target. You think about the things that children have to deal with now in their always connected, always online world. The cyberbullying, terrible stories about sextortion, shaming, trolling, hate speech, racism, misogyny, all of it. I mean, social media is like a sewer pipe. It brings out the worst in people. There are, of course, privacy and data risks. What are these platforms doing with all of this information? Imagine the information that a social media platform has gained on someone. If a child has been engaged in a social media platform since they're 12 years old, what do these social media platforms know about someone by the time they reach 22 or 23 years old? It's been said, if you don't pay for the product, you are the product. And in the social media age, I guess we are all products. Our data is the product. Our children's data is the product. I know in Quebec, very lengthy report after committee hearings were held on this very issue in the province of Quebec. The government is considering policing online influencers, which is interesting because the report says these influencers quite often portray a lifestyle that is unattainable, superficial, artificial, totally made up. They promote unhealthy body images. They promote pure consumerism. They can be havens for misinformation, conspiracy theories, dangerous health advice. So other than all of that, the platforms are great. The platforms are great. Why don't we connect? We can all be friends, and send me a friend request. Send me a DM. I mean, the potential harm, when you list it all, it's hard to fathom what we don't regulate this kind of stuff. But compelling reasons have been raised for not imposing restrictions. One of the most common ones is this is how young people connect now. We may not like it. We may not even understand it. But it's just the way of things now. And if you restrict a young person's access to social media, you are dooming a young person to a youth filled with social isolation. If they can't connect with their friends through social media, they might not have any friends at all. I have heard that case made on this very show, and we've talked about this topic in the past. Another case in favor of people using social media is digital literacy. We want young people to know how to use technology, know how to use apps, know how to use these platforms. If we restrict their access to these platforms, digital development could be delayed. Another case in favor of letting young people engage on social media platforms is it can give them a voice or a sense of empowerment. It is a way that they can express themselves on topics that are of interest to them. Maybe it's a social justice cause. Maybe it's makeup. Maybe it's music. Could be anything, really. That this is social media is the vessel that young people use to express themselves now. Is there anything to that? Is it enough to overcome the harms of social media? That's our topic of the day. Should there be age restrictions for social media? Have your say here in hour number 2. A couple of lines available there. The wait will not be long at all. Let's go to Brad is in Calgary today. Hello, Brad. You're up next. What's your opinion, Brad?
I'll make mine nice and sweet, actually. I guess I'm leery on, I do feel like I'm a bit of in my own boat on this one. Like, I do feel like I'm not quite there and ready and willing to kind of like to give an age restriction on social media just yet. But first thing, what I would like to do before that goes down that path is just to see maybe some more better education around the impacts around these apps around social media, and this can then branch off of like just more education and awareness around mental health as well too. I've got a daughter that is currently in grade 4, and she's taken a health class. And again, just kind of feeling a bit archaic. The primary focus on that is just learning about the body, whereas I would like to see more in-school education or by parents or, by whoever, just around the impact on mental health and, and what the impact is on social media as well too. And just letting the kids understand, bringing awareness what these apps could actually mean, and how it can impact the way how they view things as well. I've got a firm belief that my daughter is very well grounded. She understands risks. She understands, when things don't seem right. And that I do firmly believe that if she has questions, she will come to us. But again, I would like to see more of the education component wrapped up on it. And so if it comes down to the Canadian government potentially imposing laws, I would actually be in support of maybe making this part of like a mandated education requirement for kids that are in grade 5, 6 years old, or grade 5, grade 6 on this kind of topic.
Yeah. So you favor, the old line is educate before legislate. That would be the kind of the old line that comes to mind. Educate before legislate. Make, run public awareness campaigns, as you say, maybe incorporate it into a school curriculum in a health class or whatever the case may be, something like that.
Yeah, I'd be 100% in favor of that for sure.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you so much. And we are underway with hour number 2 of Talkback. 1, 2, 3 lines available at 1-833-668-2577, kicking this around for a couple of hours. Restricting access to social media for our youth. Age limits for these platforms, 14, 15, 16, maybe even older than that, 18. Some of the callers have suggested. Where are you on that? Join the discussion here in the second hour of Talkback on News Radio. Paul in Cambridge is up next. Hello, Paul.
Hey, Rob. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good, Paul. Thank you. What's your opinion?
Well, I think the government should totally step in. It should be just like alcohol, buying cigarettes, that you have to be at least 19. It's doing harm to the young kids. The mental state is just getting out of hand.
Okay. So some of the things that we have heard, it should be up to the parents. The parents can limit social media access. What do you think about that?
You're making them the bad guy. And I think if you made it to the government, then at least the parents can say, hey, when you turn a certain age, then you can have your phone, or you can have this, or you can have that.
Okay. Another thing that we've heard throughout the course of the afternoon here, Paul, is that they'll find a way around it. You think back to when you were a young person. If you wanted to get some beer, I'm sure you could get your hands on some beer. Or if you wanted to smoke some cigarettes, I'm sure you could smoke some cigarettes. Young people are pretty crafty. They'll find a way around any enforcement mechanism
Yeah, but
to
I
get
think
on
it'd
these
be
sites
if
anyway.
you make it harder for them. There's only a
Make it
few
harder
of us
for
that
them.
were smoking back in the day when we shouldn't have been. That's for sure.
Okay. But 19 years old, you say you should be like a fully grown adult by the time you are
Yeah,
allowed
just
to even
look at-
access
just
these
think of it
platforms.
as alcohol. We have
Right.
problem with alcohol. The mental problems that it causes society as a whole. We figured out, okay, you have to be a certain age to drink. Same with social media, and when they call it media, it just floors my mind when it's just gossip and hearsay and somebody's doing this. Because I know I wasn't very smart back in the day, and I'd be looking up bad things on the phone if I had it in my hands.
Right. Okay. I got you. Thank you, Paul. Yeah. Paul is all in favor of age restrictions for accessing social media. Let's go to Vera. He
All
is
right,
in
thanks, Mike.
Airdrie
Thanks, Rob.
today. Yeah. Thank you, Paul. To Vera is up next in Airdrie today. Hi, Vera. What's your opinion, Vera? Oh, sorry. Vera's moved along there. Let's go to Sandy then, is in Calgary.
Hello.
Hi there, Sandy. Yeah. Hi, Sandy.
Hi.
What do you think?
I'm frustrated. I've got an 18-year-old who's been all through social media and the whole shebang, and I can empathize with people that are frustrated with it. But I'm also sitting here and I'm going, if we're going to put age restrictions on social media, let's do it on churches too. There's been more damage from youth pastors, from older ministers, from priests, from all sorts of religious organizations that have done damage to children. The stuff that happens to people's brains when they're doing church stuff boggles my mind. I just saw a video this morning about a member of government in the United States saying that climate change is false because God looks after the sun, and the sun is what creates changes to the climate.
Okay. Well,
Like anti-science, anti-LGBTQ, whatever.
You could find all of that on any
misogynistic-
social media platform as well. You're a young person
Yes.
could find that on any social media platform as well, right? So
But it's if you want to talk about things that are damaging our brains and are creating issues between interpersonal issues and stuff, if you're going to control one, let's control the other. Let's control them all. And that's what's so ridiculous about it, is you can't do it. You have
can't do
to instill good judgment, and that's education. That's not the control of education that, educational vouchers and blah, 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 all that stuff. That's the problem, is you can't have the government controlling things. You need to keep separation of church and state. You need to keep churches in their lane. If you voluntarily want to go to something, that's fine. Then if you want to voluntarily go to a social media organization or play something on your phone, that's fine too. We need to be able to think rationally. So let's give the freedom of education to do that.
okay, but what if the content that is on social media platforms is compromising young people in their ability to think critically or rationally, for example?
Was it in Finland? They have part of their school curriculum is how to think critically and rationally.
Okay.
We can do that. The government of Alberta is talking about taking books out of school.
Yes.
That's dangerous. Like, education is key, and educating parents is key, and educating.
Well, I think there may be some debate about, whether that material that they want removed from some of these libraries in Alberta is appropriate for the age of those children in those schools.
Trust your librarians. And it's three. Trust your librarians. The librarians know what's appropriate for the students in their age group. They're not giving the graphic novels that were on the survey. They're not giving the graphic novels to kids that are in grade 2.
Okay. Anyway, we're getting completely sidetracked here. I
understand that.
The way that we have been approaching this is very, the evidence is becoming pretty clear now that social media is harmful to the health of young people.
And being raped by a priest or youth pastor isn't?
Well, I'm not discounting that, but again, we're more or less comparing it to, say, the consumption of, cigarettes or other nicotine products or alcohol, that we have these age restrictions in place for products that we know are harmful to the health of people. We're simply asking, should there be an age limit here? I understand you don't think much of organized religion. All well and good. Not necessarily the angle that we're exploring here. However, thank you, though. Goodbye. We'll be right back. This is Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Well, we have enjoyed the discussion today. It's always a hot topic when we talk about social media and any potential restrictions or regulations around social media. We've been asking today, should there be an age limit? 14 years old, 15 years old, 16 years old. It is a point of discussion. It is being talked about in public policy circles, whether it's the government of Quebec or in the legislature in Ontario. Other countries have already moved in this direction, as I mentioned, like Australia or France. I have often wondered, David, if many years from now we will look back and wonder how we ever allowed these social media companies to even be unleashed the way we have on our young people. I've said to myself, maybe 20 years from now, we'll look back and we'll say, what the heck were we thinking? What the heck were we?
I think so. I do think so. I mean, you just look at old advertising materials from when the tobacco industry ran everything. Yeah, and some of those images are just bizarre to look at now. I really do wonder if it'll be the same thing.
Like, are the big social media platforms the big tobacco of our time? They behave the same way in some way that big tobacco companies behaved back in the day when they had fake doctors in white lab coats doing television commercials talking about how great light cigarettes were. Low tar, Dave, low tar.
But if you want to compare it in terms of how many people use a product, what kind of market share they have, that's the only thing you can really compare it to, right? Think about how many people use social media. It's everyone. It's billions of people.
I mean, is there any doubt in anyone's mind that social media is addictive and that the big social media platforms have been designed to be addictive? Is that even in doubt anymore? Is there any doubt as well that these social media platforms are designed to appeal to young people? In that way, these social media companies kind of behave like what I would call big food. Companies that make sugary breakfast cereals with their Saturday morning cartoon characters, or McDonald's with Ronald McDonald and Hamburglar and Grimace and the Happy Meal and the toy and the Happy Meal and the playground in the restaurant. Facebook and Instagram knew for years that their platforms were harmful to the mental health of teenagers, especially teenage girls. Tried to cover it up. It was only because of whistleblowers that ever came to life. It's kind of like big tobacco in that way. Denied for years that cigarettes cause cancer. Hid research that proved smoking cigarettes cause cancer. And, of course, these big platforms like big tobacco, they're so profitable that they have an army of lobbyists in Washington, in Europe, in Asia, here in Canada. Lobbying politicians, spending a lot of money doing so, making sure there's as little regulation of their platforms as possible. But you just can't help but think that many, many years from now, we will look back, maybe filled with regret that we ever allowed this to happen. We don't let young people buy cigarettes. We don't let young people buy alcohol. We don't let young people buy cannabis. You have to be a certain age to drive a car, a certain age to join the military. You have to be a certain age to work, a certain age to vote. I think you could make a very valid case. You should have to be a certain age to access a social media platform as well. It's for your own good, and you'll thank us later. We will thank you for calling today and hope you do so tomorrow when we'll bring you a brand new topic. It's Talkback. I'm Rob Snow here with David Smith. This is News Radio. Let's go to Alan. Up next on line 2. Alan.
Yes,
Hi,
I
Alan.
think there should be a restriction, and it should be 16 years old.
Okay, and why do you feel that, sir?
Well, you can drive a car at 16, and I think, most people or most 16-year-olds can make decisions for themselves.
Okay,
I think 18 is a little too old.
18 is a
And
little
anything below
too old.
16, I think, is too young.
Okay. What about the idea? Let the parents
I
do
don't
it.
want to hijack your program, but there's
No.
some adults that should never be allowed to use it.
Okay, all right. Yeah, maybe I'm one of them. That's what my wife might say.
I might be. I might be too.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, let's circle back to Jackie and see if we can fit Jackie in here before the news. We don't have a lot of
Hi,
time now,
can you hear me
Jackie.
now?
Hi, Jack. Yeah, I hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a true story. I do believe it should be no different than drinking and smoking and everything. So 14, 16, 18, but I don't think even at 14, I think it should be younger. This is a true story, and this is exactly what happened. My daughter was younger. She was on social media. The friends were on a chat the night before. She was in elementary school. That next morning, we got up to go to school. She was very upset. She wouldn't tell me why the night before. So as we're driving to school, she said, Mom, the boy that I don't like at school, he told us all in the chat last night, he is going to kill himself today. I pulled the car over immediately. I called the school. I got the principal. He did not show up for school that day. They sent someone to the house. They called his parents. He was in his room with a knife, a rope. He was getting ready to kill himself. If social media had not been there and those kids weren't in that chat, that kid would have been dead.
That boy would be
But-
dead now. Okay.
That boy would be dead. But on another hand, I think social media, AI has got to the point where it can recognize trigger words. I think social media and programs that the kids have should incorporate that for trigger words. And a parent should be, or an adult or somebody should be immediately contacted if those trigger words are triggered.
Okay. Thank you.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Should there be an age limit to access a social media platform? 14, 15, 16. Some people have said 18, 19. What do you think? Back to the phones. Ken in Calgary. Hello, Ken.
How are you today?
I'm good, Ken. What's your opinion?
So I think I'm coming at it from a different perspective here, where I don't think age is really the problem. It's the information that's being put on social media. With the divides we're seeing in society nowadays, there is so much misinformation and lies to promote a opinion or a discussion point. And we can really see this happening in real time down south in America, where certain demographics, and I don't need to get into details, will literally lie and promote lies to push their narrative. So I don't really know if, in my opinion, if it's more of an age recommendation. It's more of cleaning up social media itself so that it's a safe place. Because you mentioned earlier that there is, groups of people that say social media is good for kids. It helps in their development. It's a new, path forward. So I completely agree with that. Social media can be very beneficial.
And if they're not on social media, then they're not social, is one of the arguments. Right? Yeah.
And nowadays, that is the direction that many kids are going. They're talking to their friends online in video games versus getting together in person. Now, don't get me started on that one. But I think realistically, it's not even kids. You see millions of people across the world believing erroneous, wrong, hateful information. And it's not a blip. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people are promoting and believing these flagrant lies.
Okay.
So
you're more interested in maybe when it comes to social media in restricting the content on social media platforms?
Well, is there anything wrong with a teenager learning about news in the world? No, it educates them. But if it's promoted as a lie and is a lie and they're learning that, well, then we're teaching our kids lies and not truth.
Okay, well, you're working from an assumption that the social media is some kind of teaching tool, but then, that's a much more tricky proposition when you're into, say, regulating the content of a social media platform, because then you're into issues of free speech and free expression. We already have hate speech laws in Canada, for example. We have laws against certain kinds of sexually explicit material that involves children, for example. Holocaust denial, these sorts of things is all already regulated through the criminal law for the most part.
Fair, but how many people have submitted an ad on Facebook that is flagrant hate speech, but then Facebook will send back the post saying this doesn't, disagree with our guidelines, right?
Okay.
So yes, we have the laws, but it's not moderated properly. Europe is doing this much more strongly than we are. They're adding education in schools. They are fact-checking and getting rid of misinformation. So I think it's just a bigger picture of social media can be beneficial to kids, but it's the content currently on there that's not actually moderated properly that's the problem.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Very interesting angle that you're approaching it at. To Red Deer, Alicia in Red Deer.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
Alicia.
Can you hear me all right?
Hi there. I hear you just fine. Yes. What's your opinion?
Perfect. Yeah. So I do actually agree a bit with the last caller, that idea of a little bit of monitoring. In my view, I gave my 13-year-old a cell phone because then we had the power to take it away. We had the power to say, I'm sorry, you're not using this appropriately. We are monitoring this. And as an 18-year-old, I don't have that right. He's an adult. So we've given it to him early on so that we can be there and we can be that accountability piece for him, and we can be that rational part of his brain that's not quite functioning yet because he's still a teenager. And we can say, we're going to teach you and walk alongside you to make sure that you're making good decisions here and learn that. And I do get very frustrated when things like Google take my parent rights away at a certain age. Suddenly I can't monitor his account anymore. I've been removed. So I think that there's some ways to integrate that learning for parents and for kids. And essentially, you don't give a kid a driver's license at 16 without a year's worth of a learner's first. You have to have someone in that passenger seat telling you to get out of the wrong lane.
Right. Okay. The caller's previous point was there has to be better regulation of the actual content that is on some of these platforms. Yeah. Misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, these sorts of things. What do you think about that idea?
I think that our kids are going to hear all kinds of things from all kinds of different sources. And what they need is somebody to say, hey, I heard this, I saw this. You need to have that open conversation, and you need to say, all right, well, what do you think about that? But in an appropriate manner. So if there are explicit content, if there's things like that, I do think that it should be a little more closely monitored. I think that, as another caller had mentioned, those flag words, those things that pop up and say, you need to be alerted of this, those are really key things, and that they can really protect our kids.
Trigger words. Yeah, trigger words. Okay. It sounds as though, for example, in Australia or in France, if you think it's helpful for your child to be on social media, you could give your consent. It sounds like you would be even open to giving your consent to having your child online. Is that accurate? Or?
Yes, I think so, as long as I can monitor and kind of be. It is a monitored account, sort of like a new driver sticker on the back of a BC car, saying, "Hey, this is somebody who's still learning the ropes, and you want them to learn those ropes before there can be criminal charges at 18, for making poor decisions." So.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, thank you so much, Alicia and Red Deer. We'll be right back with more of your calls. 3 lines available there now. If you want to join the discussion, we're talking about restricting access to social media for youth with age limits. What do you think of that? Your opinions next on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Should access to social media be restricted for youth? Should there be an age limit to log onto a social media platform? Janice in Calgary is up next.
Hello,
Hello,
Rod. How you
Janice. What's your opinion?
I don't really think there should be any age restriction. I think a person should have to earn their right to use social media.
Okay.
It's like
How
earning
would
the
someone
right,
earn
like,
their right to use social media then?
Pardon me?
How would someone earn the right to use social media?
They'd be tested. Like
Okay.
there's people making it through the workforce that don't know how to read and write. So I think if they had people tested before they got to certain areas, all the economy would run better.
Okay. Interesting. Janice. Okay. Thank you for your opinion, Janice. Let's go to Grant in Kitchener. Hi, Grant. You're up next. Grant, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think it would be kind of difficult of having these restrictions. But yeah, I think there should be something done because there's platforms out there that will show bodily harm to certain individuals. So I think it was last year there was a posting that someone hung themselves because they were on some social media, and you had a caller, I think in the first hour, that said that he doesn't go on that junk, and neither do I. I really don't care if people don't think you're good looking or you're skinny. Too much of that is going on, and these youngsters, they have enough of that going on in at school, right? So
Sure. Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, does that mean because they have so much going on and nobody needs to see that stuff, then maybe it should be restricted? It should be off limits? Because I'm confused as to whether you think that's should we have some kind of age verification system? Just, like you would, like you would at a liquor store or at a corner store that sells cigarettes. You have to be this old to gain access to this site.
Yeah, and I think it was several months ago that whoever was running this TikTok or some other platform, they were begging them to put a limit on it or having restrictions. I don't know what platform that was.
Right.
It was all over the news. So.
Okay. All right, Grant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, so we have some phone lines available there. 1-833-668-2577. I mean, there are always reasons to be wary of more government regulations. There always are. I mean, one would be, and it's been raised several times today by our callers. I mean, would it work? Would an age restriction for social media actually work? How would it work? Would young people find a way around it? It's been suggested by some of our callers. They'll always find a way around it, Rob. VPNs, they'll use their friend's account, whatever. How do you set up an age verification system that works? I mean, some of the ones you see already are laughable. Some of them just simply state on the front page, enter your birthday and click here. And then you're in. I mean, that's not very effective. Should you, for example, for some provincially run gambling sites, you have to upload a picture of a government-issued ID, which sounds like kind of a little bit better. The one concern would be, well, what happens if there's a privacy breach? We hear about privacy breaches in the news all the time. Some platforms are exploring the use of things like biometric data. Okay, press your fingerprint here, or here we're going to read your face. the big question, given everything that these platforms are gathering about us already, do we want social media platforms to have our biometric data as well? There are some platforms in some countries where they pass laws like this that require parental consent. And it is the parent who creates the account with the child using a parent's credit card, the parent's government-issued ID. There is facial matching technology for both the parent and the child, which would seem to be the most restrictive, I suppose. But would any of it work? And keep children off of these platforms, if that is the ultimate goal and the direction that maybe you think we should go in. Because a law that isn't an effective law isn't really a very good law, is it? If people can just flout the law, won't follow the law with little or no consequence, then what good is the law? This is one of the more compelling reasons for, say, legalizing cannabis in Canada so many years ago, because there were about 4 million people or so that just weren't following the law that prohibited the use of cannabis, and they were buying it and consuming it anyway. And another angle, and perhaps, more of a libertarian thing, and it's certainly come up during our discussion today, is this shouldn't even be up to the government. We don't need the government to control our use of social media platforms or the internet, and it should be up to the parents. And if the parents think it's okay, maybe even beneficial, that their children be on social media, then let the parents do their thing and police their children's social media usage. There's no reason for Big Brother government to get involved at all. And I can certainly appreciate that for sure. And then this old line that's come up today as well: educate, don't legislate. Inform parents, inform children, make it part of the school curriculum if it isn't already. Educate young people, educate adults about the potential dangers of using social media, all the threats that are out there, so people can make their own informed decisions. Educate, don't legislate. So many interesting arguments that could be made about why the government may want to take it slow or just be hands off when it comes to our children and their social media use. Still time for you to join the discussion on Talkback today at 1-833-668-2577 on News Radio.
Something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Well, we have enjoyed the discussion today. It's always a hot topic when we talk about social media and any potential restrictions or regulations around social media. We've been asking today, should there be an age limit? 14 years old, 15 years old, 16 years old. It is a point of discussion. It is being talked about in public policy circles, whether it's the government of Quebec or in the legislature in Ontario. Other countries have already moved in this direction, as I mentioned, like Australia or France. I have often wondered, David, if many years from now we will look back and wonder how we ever allowed these social media companies to even be unleashed the way we have on our young people. I've said to myself, maybe 20 years from now, we'll look back and we'll say, what the heck were we thinking? What the heck were we?
I think so. I do think so. I mean, you just look at old advertising materials from when the tobacco industry ran everything. Yeah, and some of those images are just bizarre to look at now. I really do wonder if it'll be the same thing.
Like, are the big social media platforms the big tobacco of our time? They behave the same way in some way that big tobacco companies behaved back in the day when they had fake doctors in white lab coats doing television commercials talking about how great light cigarettes were. Low-tar, Dave, low-tar.
But if you want to compare it in terms of how many people use a product, what kind of market share they have, that's the only thing you can really compare it to, right? Think about how many people use social media. It's everyone. It's billions of people.
I mean, is there any doubt in anyone's mind that social media is addictive and that the big social media platforms have been designed to be addictive? Is that even in doubt anymore? Is there any doubt as well that these social media platforms are designed to appeal to young people In that way, these social media companies kind of behave like what I would call big food. Companies that make sugary breakfast cereals with their Saturday morning cartoon characters, or McDonald's with Ronald McDonald and Hamburglar and Grimace and the Happy Meal and the toy and the Happy Meal and the playground in the restaurant. Facebook and Instagram knew for years that their platforms were harmful to the mental health of teenagers, especially teenage girls. Tried to cover it up. It was only because of whistleblowers that ever came to life. It's kind of like big tobacco in that way. Denied for years that cigarettes cause cancer. Hid research that proved smoking cigarettes cause cancer. And, of course, these big platforms like big tobacco, they're so profitable that they have an army of lobbyists in Washington, in Europe, in Asia, here in Canada. Lobbying politicians, spending a lot of money doing so, making sure there's as little regulation of their platforms as possible. But you just can't help but think that many, many years from now, we will look back, maybe filled with regret that we ever allowed this to happen. We don't let young people buy cigarettes. We don't let young people buy alcohol. We don't let young people buy cannabis. You have to be a certain age to drive a car, a certain age to join the military. You have to be a certain age to work, a certain age to vote. I think you could make a very valid case. You should have to be a certain age to access a social media platform as well. It's for your own good, and you'll thank us later. We will thank you for calling today and hope you do so tomorrow when we'll bring you a brand new topic. It's Talkback. I'm Rob Snow here with David Smith. This is News Radio.